Many of us know Jesus as someone who saves sinners, but not someone who restores the backsliders. Not someone
Wow.
who restores Apostle Peter backsliding, forsaking Christ, and Jesus saying, hey, I know, Peter, that you will fall because you're overconfident, blah, blah, blah. But he says, when you return, strengthen your brethren. And, Jesus restores him. It's Samson, who loses his eyes and hair and vision and everything. And God still gives him that chance. And he actually gives him a greater victory at the end of his life. Could you share about the redemptive work of Jesus in your life when you were already a Christian and a minister, and how you fell and how God not only restored you, your marriage, but actually you as a minister? And pretty much now today people see you as this incredible man of God, but there's also a redemptive work of Jesus that was done in you as a minister.
Yeah, absolutely. And I, unashamedly tell this story because I do believe that as I'm vulnerable and transparent, my hope is that people say, okay, God, you can do this through my life as well. I think it's interesting you mentioned Peter and how the scriptures, literally there's a command, like when you're restored, when you actually come back, strengthen your brethren. So there was an assignment that was given before he even came back. That's how confident God was in the seed that was in Peter, that it was going to, take a deep root. And so God knows, there's many of you watching right now that need this confirmation, because God knows the end from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And for me, I really have more of like a Jacob. I wrestle. Jacob wrestled with the angel. And what I love about Jacob, he's a heel grabber. He's a supplanter. Mm-hmm. And what, everybody in the Christian church teaches you, well, you got to fulfill your God-given destiny. The story of Jacob is getting a destiny you were never supposed to have. And so my prayer is not to fulfill my destiny. I don't even know what my destiny was supposed to be. Wow. I want the destiny I was never supposed to have. Wow. Because I don't know if I was supposed to have a movie. I don't know if I was supposed to write books. I don't know if I was supposed to have churches all across America. But the story of Jacob is I want what I'm not supposed to have. And I think there's something deep inside of me. I've always been wrestling with God, and people feel that in my sermons. They feel that, like you said, in my ministry. And so, long story short, if you don't deal with things from your past, at certain times in your life, things are going to trigger them and you will be forced to confront it. So you can put the lump underneath the rug and tell everybody there's nothing under the rug, but you're literally going to trip over that lump one day until you have to deal with it. You know what I mean? So for me, it's like, 15 years old, I become a preacher. I preach all over the Midwest for a couple of years. Then all of a sudden, I go to college. A lot of people know my story. Some of you don't. I was first generation college student on both sides of my family. I come from a lineage of just blue collar workers, or just poor people. So now I'm in a major university. My first professor of biology says, I'm going to use this time to tell you how there is no God. So I start getting these seeds planted in me, and I'm thinking like, maybe everybody who believes in God is ignorant. And I struggled, maybe just poor people believe in God. So that was part of my story. And even though I saw medically verifiable miracles, I started, because this is what atheism and those seeds do. It drew me away. Maybe it was the power of placebo. Maybe it was the power of suggestion. Maybe it was just the person in their own human power, conjures some. You start getting into these crazy headspaces. So I ended up becoming an atheist, which is crazy how you can go from a woman having a prophetic dream that you preach at her church, medically verifiable miracles, preaching all over, then to an atheist all within 6 or 7 years. Wow. Then I end up moving in, now junior year of college, I end up moving into this house randomly. I say that in air quotes because one of my roommates that I was paired with ended up being an Ivy League educated theologian. And he was older. He was 30 and we were all like 20. And he had come to Indiana University to finish his doctorate. And so now he finds out I used to be this fiery revivalist preacher. Now I'm an atheist. And he's like, why? And I start telling him, what about this? What about this? And he, through apologetics, he starts destroying me. And every argument I had, he was like, what about, because see, from 15 to 18, a lot of my Christian faith was built on experience. And even though I read the word, I didn't understand apologetics and I didn't understand theology. So it was like, my foundation was like incomplete. Then I go to college, this professor is saying God doesn't exist. Here's how I prove it. And I fall prey to that. And then God uses this guy named Lamont King Black. That was literally his name.
Wow.
This Ivy League educated theologian to come in and start destroying all those strongholds.
That's crazy.
That at the end of that year, I end up meeting my wife, Julie. I go back to Christ. I meet Julie, and all at the same time. So praise God. There's somebody's sign. Then, so to get to your actual question, so then all of a sudden now I married Julie like as fast as I can. That was the goal. Like, how fast can I marry this girl before she figures out that I'm not the best thing that's ever happened to her, even though she's the best thing that's happened to me? Because I was faking her out, you know. I'm like, I gotta marry her before she figures this out. So all of a sudden, I married Julie. I graduate college, married Julie, and immediately my local church pastor puts me as an ordained minister, and he puts me over the youth group. Now, I take that very seriously. I'm like, this is my comeback story, right? Yeah. So this youth group, my wife and I have such a heart for lost people. We start going to the local high schools, blah, blah, blah. We get a van. We're going into the trailer parks. We're picking people up. Eventually, our youth group, the size of our youth group exceeds the size of the adults. Wow. So now we have more kids in our youth group than the adults have in their church, which I didn't realize back then, but I was demonstrating the apostolic anointing that I carry to build. I'm a builder. So this youth group just starts exploding. And I'm trying to do the quick version of this story, but the Lord had given me this prophetic word from my pastor that he was in hidden sin, unconfessed hidden sin, and that God was going to give him an opportunity to expose it before he gets exposed. And if he exposes it, there's a path for reconciliation. But if he doesn't, the church is going to be lost. So at 22 years old, I attempt to have a private meeting with my pastor to tell him this prophetic word. And it didn't go well. It didn't go well. He starts manifesting demonically and cussing me out. And, you know, how could you say this about me? Whatever. So I come out of that meeting. I'm like, okay, well, this is my decision. You know, we're leaving the church. And now imagine I'm leading this massive youth group with this new wife, and we're like this rock star couple that's doing all these things for God. And then our church at the time was growing. Everybody loved this lead pastor, thought he was the greatest guy ever. And then I leave the church and the youth group and everything because God gave me a prophetic word. That's all people knew. Wow. So now I look like this crazy guy. So shortly after that, we leave the church. I'm giving the fast version of this. There's no proof of anything I saw prophetically. If anything, it looked the opposite. This guy was a great guy. So then all of a sudden, you know, Julie's kind of like doubting. Like, I think my husband, Mike, didn't see from God. I think that this is probably just his own thing. Maybe he's competing against him. There's all these crazy philosophies about what happened. And right at that time, my father died, my biological father. So my father, he died prematurely of a genetic brain disease. But before that, he had gone to prison for murder. So I always had this fantasy of me being joined back with my father, and we were going to restore our relationship, and it was going to be this thing. And now when I found out that he died, because I was looking for him and trying to connect with him, I thought, I'll never fulfill that desire to have my father. Then my wife, Julie, we had just had Bella. Now we go to have our second kid and we have a miscarriage. Then shortly after that, we have another miscarriage. So that's 2 miscarriages. My dad dies. And then I start spiraling out of control. So at the time, I was really big into Mark Driscoll, Acts 29, the Reformed community, you know, really big into theology, doctrine. And one of those things is Christian liberties, which is, you know, you can drink. So you see, like, alcohol enters the equation and it kind of came in under this, Christian liberties disguise, but that turns into drunkenness. So I started drinking more and more and more and more. Then right at that point, my wife's like, I can't take this anymore. Mike's a closeted alcoholic now. He's drinking every day. He's drunk all the time. I'm leaving him. So my wife leaves me, which if you know anything about trauma, all that did was fuel the fire more, more drinking, more whatever. Then at the height of all of this, my wife left me. So all these people that I've, cast demons out of them, I led them to Christ. I had this massive youth group. They're hearing, have you guys heard the gossip? Mike Signorelli's wife left him and he's an alcoholic now. I mean, it was like crazy. And this whole story was unfolding. And then at the height of all that, somebody, one of the mistresses of the pastor that I prophetically spoke to, ends up blackmailing him and sending all the evidence of all these relationships he's into the church. So my prophetic word comes up validated in the point where I was totally backslidden. So now I'm vindicated, but I'm gone, So that was kind of like how that story unfolded. And so I'm trying to give the quickest version of all this stuff. So now all these church people were like, what? Mike Signorelli was right. He was the most prophetic because he saw this a year and a half before it ever happened. But now we can't go follow Mike because Mike's drunk. It was like this crazy thing. Wow. And so then I really got to a point where, I'm Vlad, I'm just trying to be as transparent for your audience as possible. I went straight into the pig's pen. I mean, like that. I mean, I went straight into the pig's pen, and because I think the first time I backslid was when I became an atheist. The second time I backslid is when I said, God, if this is how cruel life is, if this is how unfair life is, even though I can't deny that you exist, I don't like you. And if heaven is being with you, then send me to hell. I mean, I was praying, I was saying stuff like that out loud because my dad died. Two of my unborn babies died, 2 miscarriages. My pastor, who I looked up to, my prophetic word was right. But now that guy is, I'm trying to find nice words to say, but the way I was thinking about it was, this was my hero, my pastor. So now it's like I have no pastor, no dad, 2 miscarriages. My wife left me. She didn't even stay by my side. So I was looking to God and saying, I know you exist, but like, who cares? Like, just, and it was nihilism. It was really dark. And
all the trauma, all the childhood trauma that that was not dealt with. I mean, we think just because we're activate, and I think it's so good that you're sharing that because you can have impartation, activation, but if you don't have your past cleaned up by Jesus, and if you don't deal with those things, they will surface. And sometimes, like what you mentioned, is they can surface at the height of your success and pretty much bring you down, because then you have the most people that you will damage, your family, the people that follow you. And that's really kind of what happened to you.
It is. And I had done self-deliverance. I had been through deliverance, but what I realized is that there's layers to things because I got delivered from surface level things, but I never dealt with the deeper things. And even the first day that my daughter was born, I remember being in the hospital and I held her in my hand and I looked at her and I felt this love. I mean, it was weird because I lusted after Julie at first sight, but I learned to love Julie. Love for Julie was like something, it's a process, and then you covenant in marriage, or you love your mother, but that's your mom. But so when I looked at my daughter, and I'm like, wow, I love her, and this is the closest thing to unconditional love I've ever experienced, and it's not like any other love. And I'm feeling this for Bella, and she's looking at me, and this little baby. I remember I went home that night and I was washing my hands and I looked in the mirror, and then I realized, oh no, my father never felt that for me. What was so wrong with me, or what was so wrong with him? And I just collapsed in my bathroom and had a panic attack, was uncontrollably crying. And see, this stuff got, and there's people watching right now, like at every stage of your life, those wounds could reopen. It's like you could go down the wedding aisle and then realize, oh no, my dad's not there, and that triggers something. And so this is my life. And I feel like for somebody out there right now, I just have to keep it 100 and be real, because a lot of times you see preachers on the stage and we have an assignment from God, and we have to rightly divide the word and preach the word, but you don't get to see like that, all the real stuff that we go through. And so for me, I went through all that, super traumatic. And it was actually, when I got to the end of myself. So now it's like totally destroyed my liver. I mean, I felt my body physically falling apart, and I thought, I'm killing myself. Like I am actually killing myself. And I had went out there, backslid, did that life. And when I got to the end of myself, it was actually the story of Job. I was looking through the story of Job, and I was like, God, where were you in the cruelty of his story, where, everybody dies, everything gets taken away? And it was Bob Sorge. I don't know if any of you guys have heard of this pastor. His name's Bob Sorge. I found his story. He was a worship leader and a preacher who got this vocal cord damage that was done, and it removed his ability to preach or to sing anymore. And he went before God and was like, how could you do this to me? My whole life has been in service to you. And he was searching the story of Job as well. And the revelation that he got was the mercy of God is in that God never left Job alone. The worst thing that could actually happen to us is that God leaves us alone. That's the worst thing. And I felt that, man, I got chills right now, but I felt that, and I was like, God, like, though you slay me, yet will I praise you. Like Job, the true blessing was not the children and the house and the cattle and the riches. The true blessing was God's presence. And he was saying, though you slay me, yet will I praise you, because the real curse is being removed from the presence of God. Like that's the curse of all curses is being, and so I remember being like, no, like I've already lost Julie. I've already lost my ministry. I'm about to lose my health. I don't want to lose the presence of God. That in my life has been the prize. That's the prize. That's what matters most. And I remember, and then I remember saying like, wait a second, because, I might die like my biological father, but I can choose not to live like him. And then I came, this phrase really became like the banner in that season. And it was the phrase, suffer well. And I was like, I want to learn how to suffer well. Because I think a lot of my Christianity to that point was how to get out of suffering. And that's what we teach people. Here's how you end your suffering. Do these 5 steps and you stop suffering financially. Do these 10 steps and you stop suffering in your mind. And it's like a lot of our theology is like, how do you stop suffering? And then I think in that point in my life, what I needed, and this is the deeper side, was how to suffer well. I don't know how to suffer well because I go to alcohol. I don't know how to suffer well. And then I realized that, Vlad, even ministry for me, I realized was a distraction. And it was like, because I never learned how to face this stuff. So it was like, I have to sit with this and suffer well. I have to, and that's what Job was learning, how to suffer well. And then once he learned it, then God added everything back to him. But the real story of Job is, the real blessing was twofold. One is that the presence of God, Job began to realize his activity in my life is the prize. Him being present, and then number 2, he learned how to suffer well. And I think for me, that was that season. So the quick version is, once I prayed that prayer, I said, my wife may never take me back because I've screwed up so bad. I may never get to take the pulpit. Man, it makes me want to cry. I may never get to take the pulpit again. Maybe I'm gone too far, but Lord, I can walk out my days in righteousness. And I can, whether that's even being a plumber, being a carpenter, I may never preach again. I may never have a wife. Maybe there'll be a grace, like, later on in my life for another relationship, but I just want to walk in holiness. Lord, I want to walk close with you. And I remember praying like that. And I said, I'm going to try to see if Julie will give me one more chance. So I went to Julie and I was like, hey, I'll do Christian counseling. I'll do whatever it takes. So we spent 1.5 years in Christian counseling every week, once a week for 1.5 years.
And that was your also decision, that you were initiating that.
Oh yeah, I initiated that. I said, Julie, I want to do whatever it takes. I'm stopping drinking, which I had to go through a medically supervised detox. Like, people don't understand when I say alcoholic, I don't mean like I drank a lot. I mean, like, I could have died. There's celebrities like Amy Winehouse. Amy Winehouse was a famous singer. She died because she stopped drinking. So if you know anything about alcoholism, the withdrawals are so severe that you could physically die. It's different than heroin. Like, you won't die from a heroin overdose. That's physically impossible, but you can die because of your blood sugar levels and electrolytes. Like, you become dependent on alcohol. It's that serious. So I had to go through a medically supervised detox and from alcohol and all that. I mean, it was a big deal. And then I went back and then I went to counseling with her. And every single week, I mean, we basically, again, like the word is confront. We confronted stuff in our marriage that we had never been able to resolve. And Julie got told she was wrong. I got told I was wrong. We cried. We laughed. I mean, we were angry. We went through that for a year and a half straight. And my wife was living at our parents' house, and I was just trying to be faithful, trying to be consistent, and slowly things begin to change. Slowly, I begin to earn my wife's trust back. I begin to earn, and I wasn't thinking about ministry. I wasn't thinking about, I was just focused, like, my first ministry is my home. Wow. My first ministry is my marriage. And so at a certain point, I remember our marriage counselors, they said, Julie, we really think that you need to move back in. And oh man, I've never really told this story publicly like this. It's getting me so emotional. But
thank you for sharing that, Pastor Mike, because I was at your marriage conference this year, and seeing your relationships, and your wife Julie, and how both of you love each other, how both of you lead, how both of you do that. And first time I heard most of the story was actually at the marriage conference, how both of you shared that. Man, that just ministered to me so much as well, because there's so many people that have this crisis in their relationship. And the fact that you were, in ministry, and then you went through all of this and Christian liberties and the traumas of the past, and the Lord gave you that grace to repent, and you went through counseling, you went through all of this, and you're sharing. I mean, this is brutal, but at the same time, that's what reconciliation and restoration is. So many people think, I'll just come to the conference, I'll have the demons cast out of me, and all of the trauma is going to be gone. I will never go to counseling. I'll never need to go get medical help. There will be instantly, my spouse will forgive me, and everything will be like it was before. And you sharing this shows that it's painful. Restoration is painful.
Yeah. Well, nobody automatically has a good marriage. If you've ever seen someone's marriage that you're like, I would love to have a marriage like them, they worked on that. They built that. I mean, and I didn't know that, because think about my story that I told everybody, even in this video. I mean, all I saw was divorce. So when you get married and all you know is dysfunction, you have to be something you've never even seen. Yeah. And and then not only that, but being married to, like, you could become the expert of being married to your spouse. And, my thing is, I had to learn Julie. Julie had to learn me. I'm an incredible husband to Julie now, but I would be the worst husband in the world to some other woman if I had to start over again, because every woman's different. And I didn't understand all this. So we were going through that. And finally, after a year and a half, or it was a little less than that, maybe about a year in, I remember them saying, it's time, Julie, you need to consider moving back in. And so then she moved back in. And so then we had decided we're going to do a ceremony, like we're going to renew our vows. And this is where it gets scandalous, because you all know I'm a little ornery, and I'm a little, I like, I don't know, I'm spicy. I tell people I serve Jehovah sassy. So I said, let's invite all the haters, everybody who's talked about us, everybody who's gossiped about us, everybody who doesn't believe in me. Because I had a lot of people were like, oh, Mike, this guy, he's a dirtbag. I said, I want to invite all of them to our vow renewal. And then when we all get there together, I want us all to take communion. And so we did that. And I literally said, the same blood of Jesus that washed me of my sins is going to wash you too. We're all sinners in need of the blood. I literally did this communion with all these haters at our vow renewal, and was like, listen, we all need the blood. And we did communion together. It was a beautiful thing. And so that really was how my marriage got restored. and then we just faithfully attended the local church. It might be funny for a lot of the people out there who know me to think about this, but imagine me, I was the drummer of that church. So I just showed up every week after that was over, and I just played the drums and went home.
That takes that takes a lot of humility as well to after restoration to go back to the local church from being this big shot to, and I think that's what honestly I see, that's why God is blessing you so much, because he can't entrust us if he doesn't test us, and that's a huge test, and you passed that.
Well, I got a crazy story because you're pulling this out of me because I've never. So, okay, I'm playing the drums. I'm literally the drummer of this church. I don't even care about preaching or nothing. And all of a sudden, Katy Perry's dad comes to minister one Sunday.
Really?
So Katy Perry's like multiple platinum albums, blah, blah, blah. So Katy Perry's dad comes to minister. So I'm like, oh, this is going to be kind of cool, whatever. So I play the drums and I do my thing. And I'm sitting in the sermon. And he all of a sudden goes, "Where's the drummer? Where's the drummer at?" And I'm like, I raise my hand, and he's like, "Stand up." And he was like, "The Lord." Now this guy, he doesn't know my story. I never met him in my life. There's all these people at the church, and he goes, "The Lord told me to tell you that he's going to divinely accelerate you. You're going to experience divine acceleration, and he's going to put you back in position as if you never failed, as if you never messed up. He's going to accelerate you." And he starts prophesying this. And I mean, I'm like, what? And some of the people at the church knew my story. Most of them didn't. And it wasn't shortly after that God put me back in ministry. And then, many of you guys know the rest. So it was just a crazy redemptive story. Now, all these years later, I actually have a campus in Northwest Indiana where all this happened. I bought a building down the street from the church location where the first pastor fell. It's literally on the same block, Vlad.
That's so crazy.
Then I'm doing the Domino Revival tour, and that pastor. So I go to Northwest Indiana. I've got 1,000+ people at this park. I'm doing the Domino Revival tour, and then I say, "Who wants to come forward and be delivered?" And out of this crowd, I see this guy's face, and I'm like, "No way, it's him. It's the pastor that ordained me. It's the pastor that fell." He comes to the front through the crowd, and he says, "Mike, I'm ready. I'm ready. Deliver me." And he's bawling his eyes out. Full circle moment. All these years later, I literally get to deliver the guy that I prophesied over and had fallen. I mean, you just the way it all came together, and that's why I think what you said was I preach with hope, and I preach because I've seen too much, Vlad. God can restore anything. He can redeem. If you're not dead, you're not done. He can reconcile anything if you're not dead. And so for me, it's like, while there's still time, somebody watching right now has to believe that a situation can be reconciled, that a marriage can be restored. It's not, if you're not dead, it's this. See, the only reason why we tell stories and is because a testimony becomes a prophecy declaring God, do it again. It literally becomes faith for somebody else to say, "Oh, if God can do it for Mike, he could do it for me."
That's so good.